asked about kind of how did things shift, and I will say it did manifest large, like my faith shifted largely in tie to seeing what was happening for a lot of my friends who started coming out to me, and realizing that my friends' narratives, and a lot of my friends also identifying as Christian too, and coming from the same background as me often.
Sure.
And realizing the story that they're sharing about their experience around their gender, sexuality, is just not at all aligning with what I was told happens for folks for whom, they're experiencing anything outside of this, like, cisgender heteronormative picture.
Can I ask what you were told happens?
Yeah. And I'm going to be kind of gentle in my wording because I don't want to cause anything too triggering either. But generally, I mean, this is language I think a lot of folks listening have probably heard before, but this idea of like your gender and sexuality are a choice, right? Like to kind of deviate outside of this kind of cisgender heteronormative picture. It's not a thing that's kind of happening outside of your choice, right? It's like, I'm choosing to live this lifestyle. That's often a phrase that's used. And the way it was often explained growing up, I mean, there were some like kinder perspectives that were still also like homophobic and transphobic, but like, oh, there's maybe some trauma that's happened in your life. And so it's caused you to fill in the blanks, kind of go this direction that wasn't by design kind of thing. And it's obviously a lot of harsher, more traumatic perspectives as well. But basically, like anytime people kind of were living in behaviors that didn't align with what I was taught for how we're supposed to be, including around, how we express our gender or our sexuality, the framework was that like something is going on that wasn't right, whether somebody did something to me and I've been harmed, or whether I've kind of opened myself up to like sin or darkness or something. And so it's allowed these kind of influences to come in and cause me to go down these paths that I'm not really supposed to.
So you're seeing friends that are telling you either they're questioning their sexuality or gender and are okay with it, and they don't feel like there's a choice, correct? Is that kind of what you were like noticed? Like when you say like I'm seeing people that came from similar backgrounds, right? Or struggling. I'm just curious, like what was that you saw people coming out to, what you were kind of describing?
Totally. Yeah. And I mean, the part that I would shift a little bit from how you phrased it is that they were so not okay with it, right? To think that they grew up with the same narrative that I had. And it's like, Marie, like I have been trying for years to try to do the right things because I believe for however long I'm doing something wrong, or I need to heal from this bad thing that happened to me. And that's why I'm having these experiences around my gender and sexuality. This deeply shameful storyline. And we know, unfortunately, the statistics too, for just how that can just spiral to such a dark place. And I do believe a lot of what we're taught in this kind of conservative faith context contributes to that. Like, hey, if you just are a good enough person, or if you just do this, then that, like this stuff around your gender and sexuality will kind of shift to this picture of what we're told it's supposed to look like. So if that's not happening, then that's telling me I'm doing something wrong in life. Got it.
And I also want to say, oh, absolutely. And we've talked about this before, I know, like kind of offline, like this is anything that's fundamental, right? Like I think of it's not just evangelicalism. I don't want to just paint a picture of that. Like, I think we've heard this in many other kind of fundamental conservative circles. And you're right, it does often lead to mental health issues, substance abuse issues, homelessness, suicidality, as we already know and seen every statistic that you're referring to. So you saw friends that were really struggling. You're right. And so I feel for them. What happened for you during that moment where you saw them really struggling with your own kind of questions of faith? I'm curious.
Yeah. And I wish I could say that I had like, suddenly I just sort of, I saw the light and I was like the ideal friend that they need in those moments. And obviously I was on my own learning journey, and I can't remember specific things I said or did. I know internally, while I was confused and wondering what's going on here. I'm sure I said things that were not helpful.
Sure.
But I will say, I mean, that it just threw my whole narrative through a loop, right? It's not, okay, so now here's one person. This doesn't seem to align, right? Like, I know this person. No, everything that they're afraid they're saying is true about them is like, they're a good person and they care for people. And so now I'm just more upset that they have this belief that there's something wrong with them or whatever. And that they feel like now they can't tell anybody about what's going on. Often I don't know why this has been a thing for me, but I would often be the first person that my friends would come out to. And so this like, okay, they've told me and nobody else, and they feel like they can't tell anyone else. If they do, they're going to lose their family, their friends and community. And that's, so there was this compassion that had to come in, because if I held on to the beliefs that I was taught, it just, I would just be lying to myself. It's like, this is not what's happening with my friend here, that they're just, choosing this.
No,
path, right. That's just not happening at all. And so I don't understand what's happening, but I know it's not this thing I was told. So that kind of opens up the opportunity to say, well, if it's not that, let me try to figure this out if I can. And so that's kind of where, you kind of keep pulling at that thread.
Seek support from people that were kind of in that same position at the time as you? Like, because I hear you, right? Like, part of it is like, love everyone, and they're struggling and in pain. Were there other people that could understand where you're coming from? Because I'm assuming at the same time you're still going to a conservative church, right? And so I mean, that's an assumption. I could be 100% wrong,
right?
So it's confusing, I would think, even though you're loving these people and seeing that they're struggling, right? And that message you were taught to love everyone, have compassion and passion. So how were you able to evolve as well? Like, were you getting support, or was it just a lot of reflection and talking to others and seeing friends? I'm just trying to it's a hard spot to sit in, right?
Sure. Yeah. I think honestly, and it would have been ideal. A different scenario would have been more ideal than what happened, but probably my support was then my friends who'd come out, right? Because it's not just, I'm still going to conservative church. It's like, we're going to that conservative church together. Right. So then it's like my friend who might be like, yeah, so-and-so said this homophobic thing. Like, oh gosh, I can't believe they said that, that like we're kind of in it together in a way. So at that point, there were fewer resources back then too, but they were there. I just didn't know, like, I don't have, a person I can go to like, hey, is there a different book I can read or anything outside? Like, this is my bubble. And I don't even know that there's a bubble outside of this bubble. Right.
For sure.
So at that point, it really was kind of insular in that sense, like in my own internal world. And then, me and my friends who'd kind of come out, and maybe there'd be like a few folks who trickle in, like, okay, they also came out to so-and-so and they were cool about it. So like, now we're kind of like in on it together.
Build kind of your own little like niche community within this church. It's interesting. Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow. And, something we've talked about, like, so is this what's kind of made, I don't like the word made, but like given you compassion to work with folks navigating similar, I mean, you did it with your friends, it sounds like. Is that what kind of led you to be this affirming Christian therapist, like seeing people struggle and want them to be able to hold both narratives in a way, kind of what you do for friends and family?
Yeah.
Like, what was your,
I still don't know why this is. It just, there must be some like something in the universe or just like, it's not on my own. Like, I'm going to be a therapist who specializes in this thing. Like, genuinely what happened, this is years that are passing now between where these stories are happening. But, I become a therapist and do my training. And the first place that I got hired when I was pre-licensed and doing my internship was in a Christian context, again, a conservative Christian context. Right. So I'm still living in this world where I'm like, I know in my brain, I got these like, keep it to yourself, Marie, because people don't like it when you speak up about this stuff. But I didn't have any outward advertising or anything of like, hey, I specialize in this thing. It's like, hey, here's this Christian therapist working at this group, and inevitably the same thing would still happen, so because it was a Christian practice, we advertised that we'd have like church clergy coming in or folks in kind of leadership positions and faith contexts. And they're coming in for anxiety, which is what I would, what I did advertise I specialized in. And then it's just, again, you pull at the thread, and then the amount of, like, within a number of months of me working there, I realized like more than half of the folks that I'm working with are coming out to me, or maybe if they weren't using that phrase, it might just be like, yeah, also Marie, this thing is happening and I have to tell you about it. Right. And it's something that's deeply tied to gender, sexuality. And then just realizing this thing is following me. And for me, it was like, I gotta learn, like, it just like sparked something in me. So somehow like folks are finding me, even though I'm not advertising it. And I'm like, I need to educate myself on what's really happening here, you know, and so it's almost by a byproduct of my friends and then my clients coming through. Then I really did follow up and say, okay, well, let me really learn about this. Let me find communities that are trying to at least ask questions and understand this better. Let me look for resources outside of a faith context, all of that. So that's kind of.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. It was kind of happening for you in your personal life is what you're kind of saying. And then it happened to just follow you into your clinical life.
Absolutely.
Almost a good thing it happened in your personal life first, that you were kind of better prepared for it.
Yes.